When pandemic arrived and the world shuddered, we learned about essential. Not only who was essential, those classified as such workers thrust to the front lines, protecting those of us sheltering in place too often with their lives, but also what is essential. As our worlds shrunk and our calendars vacated, the regular rhythms of time interrupted, blurred, we found that much that filled our days past was not actually truly essential, whatever that essential means. That meetings in person could be held online, realized that much of our doings emanated from inertia, not purpose nor necessity. And with our lives stripped away, laid bare, naked, we noticed, maybe for the first time, or at least the first time in a long time in recent memory, all that did not seem essential, but only for we took it for granted. Singing together, voices trained and untrained, blending as one, the power of bodies united in purpose and proximity, the meaning of spaces sanctified by a community who called it home for generations. We wrestled, we questioned, for the stakes were graver suddenly. Suddenly we had to ask ourselves, what is worth the risk? Both the risk for me, but also the risk for that greater we. Suddenly, our choices had strings attached, strings weighed down by the threat of disease and sickness, strings that were always actually there, of course, but SARS-CoV-19 made them impossible to ignore. What is essential became a daily, quotidian wrestling. What seemed essential one day, as infections went up, seemed frivolous the next. What seemed unessential at first felt throbbingly imperative after 6, 7, 8 months of obedient abstinence. Is this how we want to live our days? We asked ourselves. Never quite sure. That refrain from Annie Dillard echoing in our minds, how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And we decide that already in motion. Investing precious minutes and seconds, the fractional units that combine to make up the unity of life, spending them moment by moment. What is essential? Truly. Deeply. My sweat pours down the bicycle. Over sermon texts, in parenting too, though often that elicits that other type of saline secretion, lubricating moments where I want to give up, on the worthy and retreat. Where do you choose to sweat? Not just the salty type, the metaphysical sweat, the effort of your life force, however it finds you able. What causes, which people, what movements, what realities do you pour your life's most precious equity, time, with attention? There are items that hang out in my Amazon shopping cart for months. Mascots of an inner struggle between the forces of you deserve it and you don't need it. Voices that battle within me. Do I want it or do I need it? And if I want it, do I deserve it? And how do I know that anyways? How do I know what I deserve? I've noticed it's on the heavier days where they transform into tracking numbers, slowly making their way across maps, a sparkling light of future pleasure dangling out there in the future, making it easier to move from one day to the next, to the next until they arrive on my front doorstep. It's not just stuff, purchases, things that lure us with future promise. Studies find we often derive more pleasure from looking forward to vacation than the actual escape. Busyness is another culprit. If we are in constant motion, always doing, we fill life with evidence of our actions, of the way we've mastered its unruliness, sating our fears with the illusions of control, of our competence. For if we are doing, we must be in control, right? All of the shopping, the looking forward, the busyness can, without vigilance, be how our weary selves attend, can be how our weary selves attempt to quiet the pleading voices within and without, whose wise voice calls to each and to all, is this the life I truly, deeply desire to live? What is essential? It's easy to imagine essential as the bare minimum, needs, not wants, what is required to scrape by, but nothing more, what is necessary to survive. Especially for those of us who have more, we can often disregard essential. We've tried this approach to essential, of course, in the soulless concrete jungles of Soviet apartment blocks or inner city projects closer to home, where efficiency of repeated design, or a futile attempt to encase in cinder blocks the boundlessness of human vitality. No, essential was never about the minimum. Although, in college, my friends voted me most likely to run away to a monastery. My dream was always to have all that I owned to fit in a backpack. So when the pressures of the world became too much, I dreamed of the escape of simplifying, of fronting only the essentials, like Thoreau wrote in Walden, these words echoing in my mind. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live that which is not life, for living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I want to live deep and suck out all of the marrow of life. For what our transcendentalist found friend on the shores of Walden outside Concord was not the renunciation of modern life in totality, but an unrelenting questioning, of analyzing, of data collecting, observing the costs in life. Not simply the cost of living, the 6 cents he spent on pumpkins, the $8.40 he spent on clothing, but the costs to our living. How much life is required. The cost of a thing, he surmised, is the amount of what he called life, which is required to be exchanged for it, both now and later. Thoreau's economics disparaged GDP before its advent, before shifting the calculus from profits earned to time redeemed. For it is time, minutes and seconds, hours and days, weeks and years, decades and centuries. For it is time, seconds, minutes, hours, decades, years, that are the scarcest resource of life. Looking upon his neighbors who traded away their time to tend to larger farms with bigger equipment, pursuing and receiving greater profits, Thoreau asked at what cost to their lives, and found their sacrifice only gained them slightly nicer possessions. We can, of course, take the wrong lesson from Thoreau. that he rejected life. He calculated the minimum, thus finding the essential. But he didn't reject life. He worked for others, receiving pay. He walked to town. He spent time with his friends who made different choices. He had Emerson's wife do his laundry. He didn't, his was not a rejection of life, but a cross-examination of it. Finding the essential fronts of life not to be about simply the basic necessities, but about the essence of life. The life he and he alone was called to live. What if he did not live? Would not be life. Would not be living. What is essential is what is required for the essence of something, of someone, of you, of me, of us together to be maintained. What is essential is what is necessary for the essence to be maintained. Essence speaks to something more core to living, more vibrant and personal than simply basic needs. It sparks, it dances with the uniqueness of human bodies and souls. You know essence. You know it when you return to a beloved place after years away. And even though time has transformed it, paint has chipped or colors changed, new people moved into rooms or offices, despite everything of its outward transformation, the inner dimensions are recognizable to your soul who truly knew it, its essence persisting, enduring. You know essence. You know it when you come out of the dark place and recognize yourself in joy once again. You know essence. You recognize it when you serve another, finding there's something core to being human, the reciprocity of that is at the heart of life. Because there is something about essence that, like DNA, manifests in fierce diversity from the remixing of the humblest and the samest ingredients. For both drag queens and butterflies, class clowns and rainbow trout, presidents and fungi derive their bodily forms from the rearranging of 4 simple letters in the helix of life, found within every cell of their being. 4 simple letters rearranged to create you and me and all that lives. 4 simple letters that spell out the sentence that contains a spark of essence. 4 simple letters. We're complicated, but we're not. I'm complicated, but I'm not. You're complicated, but you're not. And so is the same with essence. For the core of this life has something to do with mutuality. It has something to do with integrity. It has something to do with joy. It has something to do with reciprocity. It has something to do with together and beyond. It has something to do with us dancing and smiling. What is essential? What is the essence? And when you catch a glimpse of it, like a wild animal, what do? Do you scare it off with the noise of busy, or do you remain quiet in the unrelenting chaos? Because in its presence, you know something true once again. And what do you do to protect it once you know it? What boundaries of love hold it in your tender embrace? What way of being do you allow it, cultivate it, to allow its tendrils to unfold, emanating from within and without? What is essential? What is essence? Is found in a spark and a dance, not in a basic necessity. What is essential is to live what is life, and nothing more, nothing less. Amen. And may we be blessed.